Welcome to the 5 o'clock China Sourcing Seminar. We're excited to have you all here with us. Thank you so much for joining us. We have an amazing bunch of panelists here who have a lot of experience overseas, and we're all happy to share that experience with you. So I'd like to introduce each one along the way and what they can offer you. So why don't you guys introduce yourselves and a little history about what you have with your connections to products in China. So why don't we start with you, Sergio?
Sure. Can you guys hear me? All right, go. What about in the back? Anybody? All right. So basically, my name is Sergio Godinho. I'm currently the VP of Business Strategy for Flybar. My boss is recording me, which is cool. I have 25 years of retail experience. I lived through a lot of different transformations over those 25 years. I've worked for small retailers, large retailers, developed a lot of brands, helped a lot of people attain success, and over time I've learned a lot. So it's been a great journey. I'm excited to be here and share my experience and what I've learned.
I'm Yossi Novak. I lived in China since I was 18. I moved back to New York a couple years ago. I work for Mercury Innovations. We sell to all the retailers in America, Canada. I worked on almost 100 items, which are in Walmart right now. Developed items which have sold millions and millions of units. When I was in China, I worked with sourcing and built my experience over there.
I'm Mark Berkowitz. I'm an attorney. I'm a partner at Amster, Rothstein, and Ebenstein. I have a somewhat different perspective than some of our other panelists. I get to see what happens when people don't source their products properly and don't do their homework beforehand. And I get to see the fallout from that. We see all the patent issues, the trademark issues, copyright, every aspect of litigation, particularly in the Amazon world, when people go ahead and source things, but issues come up, whether other brands fighting with them, whether they want to kick off other brands, and it's been a big change in our practice too, and we can talk about that today.
Yes.
Sorry for not making the introduction before the program started. I was trying to get people to come into the room to make it even better. Now it's perfect. My name is Shia Rubenstein. I am the co-founder of JCon, and JCon runs many conferences, whether it's for real estate, Amazon, healthcare, elder care, architectural, and it's really with this in mind to help the people who are in the industry become bigger and better at what they do, more successful. And I do it together with my partner, Rabbi Yehoshua Werdy from the Crown Heights Young Entrepreneurs. So first of all, I'd like to just take the opportunity to thank Alan Horowitz for the amazing boot camp he gave before and for moderating now this panel. And I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to come and give back. It's amazing to see the people who are successful in their space, making themselves available to come, speak, and give back. And thank you to you for coming. We put ourselves out there. We spend a lot of time, energy, and a lot of money trying to have you in mind, and it's very fulfilling to see when tonight close to 700 people will be attending starting from now throughout the next part of the event. So I also would like to thank Savvy Returns for sponsoring this session. So feel free to visit their booth after these educational seminars. And without further interruption, here you have your moderator, Alan Horowitz. And just speak closer into the microphone.
Okay, I think you guys can hear me, right? Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all who sat through that long boot camp, which probably turned into a boot napping session, but I'm hoping thank you all. Anyway, so you heard the great panelists that we have here. Of course, whoever's in my boot camp knows my little China history. I'll also tell you that I actually was a production and sourcing major. Not major, but that was my career, actually. I did production and sourcing for many, many years, traveled overseas extensively. Not to the effect of Yossi, who lived there, and I always say I'm behind him now, but I spent many, many, many months in China over the year, and I certainly built enough products from A to Z from all over the spectrum, and I built from learning from how to produce it into finalizing it. And today we're going to all share with you our experience on how to get things going and how to make it better for tomorrow. So So one of the things we're going to talk about, if you have questions, we're going to take them all at 5:45. I know that's a strange time to tell you right now, but at 5:45, we'll be ready for whatever questions you want to throw at us, at any of the panelists, and we want to help you and certainly answer those questions. If you have something specific that you want to ask, please let me know. I'll get your paper if you have a little paper, and we'll try to address that during the session. Okay, so first, I'm just going to talk about one thing which is probably on everyone's mind before we actually talk about other things, is today we have a situation in China that has changed. And how has that changed? Because we have tariffs today, we have viruses and problems, and Chinese New Year, and I'd like to address this to each one of our experts here of how this is going to affect us. Well, maybe today it may be coming to an end, but if we have this problem going forward, how does this happen with problems on Amazon as far as legalities? How does this happen with retail and, of course, developing new products? So I'll start with Sergio, if it's okay.
Sure.
Okay, please.
So I think what's happening now in China is obviously very difficult, and for those of us that have team members or partners that work in China, it's obviously certainly it's on our mind. It's something we think about every day. We care about our teammates in China, so it's a very difficult situation. From a business standpoint, also very difficult. You have China being the factory of the world in a lot of cases. They manufacture for everybody. And it's hard right now to really understand the full scope of it, beyond the numbers. Right? There's going to be an economic impact, but the economic impact has yet to be realized because once you delay manufacturing, it doesn't impact retail until a later date. So we still have a lot to learn in terms of what it's going to mean and the type of impact it's going to have. And certainly the longer it goes on, the worse it's going to get. Right now, we were talking about it before, we do have some factories that are starting to open, but it's very limited capacity. So, unless things get a lot better, you're going to see that it's probably going to be at least early March until things get somewhat back to normal, if even it's back to normal.
Sergio, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Would you expect now there to be much more closeouts on the market, or would you think that there would be a lot of, let's say, excess production and companies that want to remove those goods quickly from China, and maybe there's an opportunity to get them great deals?
I don't know. I think the reverse, in my opinion, my experience, it's going to cause the reverse. I think you're going to have less product out in the market because basically there's no production right now. You had Chinese New Year, right? So China stalls for 2 weeks. Then everybody goes back to work. But what you have happening now is they're not going back to work. So things in China are not getting manufactured. So you're going to have on Amazon, at retail shelves, at some point you're going to have fewer products in supply chains, which means there's going to be less product. And I think it's a good thing, right? If there's product just sitting there and there's fewer options, it means other things will sell. But it's definitely going to have an impact, right? I mean, it has an impact for Apple all the way down to
Correct.
the smallest company. So,
Thank you. Yossi, question to you. If the tariffs are implemented again and we end up with more problems with tariffs, how do you feel this will affect as far as products that are selling today on Amazon and things that we can put on e-commerce? How will this affect us if the prices go up 25%?
So we've not seen a great increase in retail costs in a lot of the products on Amazon and in retail. Like Five Below came out with 10 Below because of the tariffs, but that's the only big difference that we've seen. The tariffs have been absorbed a lot in the unit costs. Manufacturing costs have been forced to, manufacturers have been forced to lower the cost of materials. I think we're just going to see a greater increase of lower quality products to offset the increase of the cost of the product due to the tariff.
Thank you. I'm going to turn this question also to Mark, who wants to comment on it.
Yeah, I mean, to pick up on what Yossi was saying, I mean, at least from an intellectual property perspective, one of the issues that you're going to see is that, people scrambling to find alternative vendors, alternative factories, and you can't lose sight of the fact that you still have, there's still, patent trademark issues that your initial factory may have already dealt with. If you're scrambling to look for a new factory, a new supplier, you still have to keep in mind that there might be IP issues, and, don't just, I know in case you're in a hurry, you still have to, go through the due diligence and make sure you're not, going to get stuck with a whole bunch of goods you can't sell.
Right, right. It's a very good point. So we all are facing today a dilemma with what's happening with China and what will happen with China or what won't happen with China. And certainly things have changed and they will be changing going forward. So we talked about in the boot camp, and I'm going to also address this here, everybody also wants to know how do you make a product and where do you get products from? What's a great idea for a product? How do I get a product? What do I sell? Because everybody wants to sell something, and of course, you want that successful opportunity. So first, I'm going to actually turn the question to you, Mark, because the first thing that we have is, if I'm creating a private label product, and I think we just had a question like this, I'd like to actually address it. If we have a private label product, and we're selling it, and now we are selling something completely new on the platform, can we sell other people's brands if we had a problem in the past? So we have a private label company that we're working with, and we're making our own brands, but then we go ahead and we start selling other people's brands. What's our problem on Amazon directly this way?
I mean, you see every brand, being very protectionist of Amazon. They want to be the only ones on there. They don't like the competition. They want to be able to be the only ones. They want to be able to maintain pricing. So you have to sort of be careful. You do your research before, see which brands are very aggressive, and decide whether it's worth going after those. There are some companies that still, they don't really care. They're happy as long as the products are genuine and authentic. They're okay with you being on Amazon. But there are a lot of companies that are very aggressive, and they file lots of fake rights owner complaints, and they try to bully other people. So before you go into those brands, you really have to do your homework first and decide whether it's worth it.
Is there a specific brand that gives you the hardest time as a lawyer? Because I think we all want to know, as we're selling things, which to avoid, where we're going to have the most problems. One thing we really don't want to see is copyright and counterfeiting problems, and we know that what that means on Amazon. So how would you address that?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to call out any specific brands, but we're actively litigating against quite a few companies that have gone too far and that will file the false complaints and just don't care. I mean, so you really have to weigh those risks before you get into it.
Thank you. And now my question turns to you, Yossi. I'd like to ask you, when you're creating a product, and we all have a great idea, so let's say we're on the platform, we found a great product, and to avoid litigation, we decided to create something similar ourselves. So we're going ahead and we're creating the product in China, and we'll put our own brand on it, of course. It's not necessarily private label, but a private development plan. How would we go about getting something out of China, and how would we develop it? What would you suggest?
Well, the first step is to make sure you're not infringing on someone else's IP by contacting your lawyer. And then you check the market, see what's out there, see if there's a similar item in the market. Go to Alibaba, see what the Chinese are doing that's similar. If they have a similar item, I would suggest you source a factory that has made something like that before and start discussions with them to see how you can develop an item with a similar, let's say tech that you can put your design or tech feature onto.
How much time would you allow for development of a new product?
All items are different. Cut and sew products are quick. 2-3 weeks you could get a quick bag out of the market, while products with injection and with PCBs, they could take 2-3 months to develop at least.
I'm just going to ask you to define what, for the audience, I'm not sure if they understand injection molds, and
Okay.
maybe you can just...
Simpler products can be really quick. It could be a month or 2 months. Complicated products can be 2 to 6 months. Products with many components and stuff.
So if you're planning ahead for next year, let's say, and you know that it's going to take you 6 months, and the product won't come out until, let's say, in the fall, if you start now. So now I'm going to turn this also to Sergio. You're a retailer. How would you handle that? Now you're waiting patiently for Yossi to develop that item for you, and now he's telling you 6 months. So how would you suddenly change your strategy in terms of retail?
I think in terms, the challenge is, the reality is the retailer's not going to wait. If the item's not developed and it's not ready to go to shelf, they're probably going to move on and pick something else. So it's important when you're going through the product development process that you're really allowing enough time and you're going out in front of the retailer with close to something that's a finished good or something that you can deliver quickly. Obviously, if you're thinking about Amazon, generally you control when it goes up, so less of an issue. When you're thinking about, I need to sell to someone, the larger retailers are planning their space really far out, and they've definitely been pressured by e-commerce in terms of moving quickly, but they still move relatively slow. So unless you're getting out ahead of them and really giving them something that's close to a finished good, you're going to put yourself in a very challenging position.
So for those here who sell department stores or large mass merchants, and they have planograms, and they plan out their whole
Sure.
merchandise and the planogram in the middle of the store with all these types of items that Yossi can actually manufacture. How would you handle that, Yossi, when he tells you my deadline is here, and now I have to get this product? Because I know that some people have this dilemma.
So it's our job to know ahead of time what the retailers are going to look for, what the market's going to look for, to develop items and ideas while the 6 months ahead of time. Right now, there's unfortunately this virus in China, which gives us a great opportunity to develop the extra time to develop all these ideas that we've had. Extra couple weeks is a great time in development, and the product development is about knowing the market, knowing when to plan ahead, knowing when the market needs what.
Thank you. So the next question I'm going to ask you is regarding legalities in terms of counterfeiting on Amazon. I know we just addressed that, but I'd like to take it a little bit further. You went ahead and promoted a product, produced it, and though this person didn't actually do all their homework and they found out later there could be some legal problems, it's being ordered into the retail store now and it's on your planogram. And now, what happens in a case like that? What would you do?
Well, if it's counterfeit is a knockoff. It's a exact copy. It's got the names on it, the exact copy. So one thing I did want to point out if it's okay, before I directly answer your question, is, I think one of the things that surprised me when I got into this was that, you think of counterfeits, you think of, the fake Gucci bags and things like that. What you're seeing is this whole industry popping out of China where they're counterfeiting popular goods that show up on Amazon. Sometimes simple things, $10 items that you would never think that somebody would counterfeit. And so you have to be really careful when you're sourcing in China. You'd be amazed what they would counterfeit. But to answer that directly, if counterfeiting, you can't just say I didn't know. It's it's a problem. And if you do find out that you've brought in counterfeits and that you've passed them on to retailers, the best bet is to pull them back as quickly as possible.
So I'm going to direct another question to you because we've all faced this. If you've been selling on Amazon, the famous word that starts with an S and ends in an N is probably one of the worst things you can hear. If anyone didn't know what that goes in the middle, it's called suspension. And suspension has to do with several different reasons. One of them, of course, because you're selling counterfeit, quote unquote, counterfeit goods, or someone accused you of counterfeiting in that respect. So you're right before the holiday season, and this has happened to many of us. You're right before the holiday season, and suddenly you found yourself in the morning waking up and finding your account was suddenly suspended. And that's a nice good morning from Amazon. So how quickly can you get someone open? What do they need to do in a case like that?
Yeah, you start with the usual channels, submitting the plans of action. Hopefully you have invoices that, can show that your products aren't counterfeit. If they are indeed counterfeit, usually your best bet is to fall on your sword and, try to beg for forgiveness. If you've already passed through all of those channels, you've been rejected, multiple times, and Amazon says they don't want to hear from you anymore, you're left with trying to arbitrate against Amazon, which is a challenge. You can't take, as an Amazon seller, you can't take Amazon to court. Your only option is arbitration, which is kind of like a private proceeding. Unfortunately, in those proceedings, Amazon does have an advantage, and they get to keep it private, and there's not a lot of history and background to them.
So as far as arbitration, what's the success rate that somebody could expect in a case like this?
It really just depends how clean their account is, and who's in the right and who's in the wrong. At the end of the day, the arbitrator is experienced attorney, and they tend to be fair.
Well, I have to share one question with you. Someone asked me last week, is it worth it? Is it worth the arbitration? I'll let you guys also think about that for a minute. I'd like us all to answer that. Is it worth the arbitration?
It depends how much money is at stake. I can tell you, unless it's 100 or a couple 100,000 more, it's probably not going to be worth it.
How do you feel about that, Yossi?
If you have stock that you have to move and you're going to have to sell at a loss, spend the money on a lawyer.
All right. And Sergio?
Look, at the end of the day, I think if you're planning on being in business for the long term, I think you want to avoid it because it's not going to help you. It's going to damage your relationships. It's obviously you have to go through arbitration, which is not a pleasant experience. So, the one thing I'll say with respect to counterfeiting, with the tariffs that were just signed and the agreement between the U.S. and China, there are definitely a lot of new measures that are going into place, whether it's checking imports. We recently had to go to our licensor to get our factory verified that it was licensed to produce. So that was somewhat new that we hadn't experienced before. And then, when you deal with the majors in particular, the major retailers, the Targets and the Walmarts of the world, they also have checks that they've put into their process to make sure that, we've had questions like, can you verify that you own the brand, right? So kind of you would assume so, but they're actually going through the process of having you check and having you submit paperwork to show that, yeah, I do own the brand, right? And that's obviously the step beyond that, which is making sure you're not infringing any IP, but they are checking, like with the trade agreement. There's new measures with retail. They're constantly looking for that. They don't want to be in the business of selling counterfeits, right? It's not good PR for them.
Right. So we have a lot of situations here and how to combat them. And I will also add my 2 cents here. Is it really worth it? And my advice to that gentleman last week was, actually no. And why did I say actually no? I think I'm sharing all the same thoughts here. Unless you really have some kind of incredible volume that you've been doing on this account. It's not easy to open a stealth account on Amazon, and we're not really going to get so deep into talking about this, but the problem of opening a second account is that Amazon won't let you. So the minute that you have this development of wanting that second account, Amazon's turning you away. So you have to do it in a sort of stealth fashion. Now, I don't want to spend too much time talking about the stealth accounts here because maybe this isn't the forum. We're on China. So I really want to talk about, though, once you have the opportunity to really sell on Amazon and you have a clean account, and you want to put those products on there, how are you finding the product? What's the first place that you want to develop a product from? And how would you begin that process? Yossi, I'm going to turn this to you.
You start with an idea, check the market, make sure the idea is viable. Then go, welcome. I would say first step is go to Alibaba, see what the Chinese market has in terms of that type of product. Does your idea exist already? If it exists, what can you change to improve it? Is your idea strong enough that's better than the competition, that's better than what the suppliers have? Or can you sell it, the exact same product that the supplier already has? Maybe that's a viable product on its own.
Now, if the product is new, but hasn't really been tried and tested, how would someone go about saying, how am I making this successful? I certainly want to build this listing on Amazon. I have a great idea. I looked on Alibaba. I don't even see anything like it, but I have something that's similar. Certainly, we have no issues here with competition. What do I do next? What would be the good strategy for me at this point? I'm going to talk to the next question. I'm sorry. Actually, you know what? I'm sorry. We add another fantastic expert to the panel, and if you don't mind, please introduce yourself.
Just speaking, it should be on.
It's on.
Hi. Sorry, the question is for me? If
I'd
it's a
like you
new
first to
product?
introduce yourself and your expertise.
So I'm Kush Agarwal. I work for Swish Sourcing, which is one of a big Swish sourcing company. We have got offices everywhere. I'm based in India. I'm here on business to New York for the first time in my life. And I'm happy to be here at the JCon. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you. So you said you're from India and you have expertise with what type of areas specifically on Amazon?
So it's not limited to Amazon. I have my own textile company. I'm a third generation manufacturer. I have my own factory.
Perfect.
So any textile guy over here, if you know about textile, I can talk anything about textile with you.
Great.
And I help people in steel, plastic, wood, any product. If you want, if it's made in India, I can help you out.
Well, now I'm going to turn this question to you right after let Yossi finish. We were talking about how developing a new product. We want to start with a brand new product on Amazon, and we looked around, and on Alibaba, as Yossi suggested, we have no competition. So now we got a great idea. So this is where the great ideas begin. This is where they say the millions are made. But what do I do? Where do I take it from here? Obviously, I don't have any legalities to deal with here, and now before I manufacture it, what's my next step? Yossi?
If you really strongly believe in the IP, the first thing you do is reach out to him and protect your IP.
Yes.
Okay, so maybe we could turn this question right to you.
See, making a new product or an existing product takes time. So you have to spend time with the factory because What's over here in your brain, you have to be on the floor and get it executed. You have to travel, you have to spend money, you have to be patient with it.
So if you're saying that, the first thing you say is, do you have to travel, you have to spend money. So would you say in order to develop a new product, somebody would have to travel to India, to China, to somewhere, to really be successful with that product? So if there's anyone here in this room that's actually has a great idea and wants to really develop that item, could they stay where they are here in New York, in Brooklyn, and be successful?
They can find a factory in Brooklyn and get it made, start the business, and then if it becomes big, then make it cheaper in India or China.
Okay, so I'm going to turn this question to you, Sergio.
Sure.
How do you feel about that?
He's right. I think if you have a good idea and you want to pursue it and you kind of don't know where to start, you do all the things that everybody on the panel said, right? You have to do your research. I think ultimately, if there's not somebody that's making that item, it's not a pre-existing item, you have to find something similar, right? What's the composition of the item? Is it cut and sew? What is it exactly that you want to make? And you need to find factories that have an expertise in that area. And that's the first step, right? You got to find the factories, and then you have to get the item developed. And you have to go through the process to make sure the item is good, because you want to bring something to the market that's going to work, or that's going to deliver on customer promises.
So just a quick reference to all of you, each one at a time. How do you make sure the product works if you're getting through the testing stages? How would you all handle that? And how would you do that? What would be your first step? And then we'll pass it along the panel.
Many samples and prototypes. And overuse it, let people test it, use it yourself, make sure it's delivering. You got to set really expectations in terms of what the experience is going to be with the consumer, depending on the item. This is a very broad question because we don't know what the item is, right? So what is it going to deliver to the consumer? Why do they need it? And ultimately, it's got to fulfill that, whatever it is, right? Whatever it is, whatever those list of things are. And if it's a widget and a radio needs to play music, it's got to play music the way you want it to play music, different than any other player plays music. So ultimately, you have to go through all the steps. You take it to a factory, you make prototypes, go through production, QA, and make sure it's working, and tweak until you have what you feel is a good enough product. And we live in the world of everybody can do it for a third the cost, a third the time. So time is of the essence in anything that you do. So if you have a great idea, you don't want to take 6 years to bring it to market. So you do want to take that lead position and make sure you get out to market. So it's hard, right? You got to make sure you do it right, but you don't want to take too long to get it out in the market. Because when you get out in the market, immediately somebody's going to be on it. There's going to be a couple Amazon sellers who probably want to make the same thing. They want to sell it on Amazon. And there's going to be other non-Amazon people who want to do the same thing. So those are all the things that you kind of have to keep in mind.
Yossi?
I agree with everything Sergio said. I would add, if you're on a limited budget, not necessarily do you need to travel to China first thing. You could first communicate online with some suppliers, even get a prototype via sketches, via phone calls with the factory, video calls, and then once you're satisfied, at that point you could perhaps venture out or hire a sourcing company or go to a show or something like that.
So Mark, now you have the ability to explain that now you got this new product to market, you made all these great samples, and you did all this great testing. Now you put it out in the market, and all these sellers are trying to jump in and take advantage of your brand new product. Certainly they want to copy it. What happens now?
Well, I would say the answer starts in the beginning. It's right when you have the idea, and before you start trying to get it manufactured and talking to suppliers, you want to talk to an attorney or an experienced seller and make sure it's protectable. So don't waste all your time and money if something can't be protected with a patent, copyright, some sort of intellectual property. Why put in the investment if somebody is going to start knocking it off right away? The second thing is, before you go ahead and start talking to suppliers in China and other consultants, you either need to have something on file that will protect you from that person stealing your idea, or think about having non-disclosure agreements in place or other types of agreements that will protect you so that they don't just take your idea and run away with it. You see even major companies, giant retailers that will steal inventors' ideas all the time. So you have to be aware of that.
Kush, I'm going to turn this question to you. As a factory, and this is a tremendous thing, so now we're contacting you as a factory. We're here in the States. We don't really get to see you. We're fortunate. Thank you for being with us today. But we don't have that opportunity all the time. So we created a great new item, and we're bringing it to you to say, hey, let's make it. You're not so concerned with the legalities, as Mark is saying, because your job is to create. So would someone have to feel nervous about bringing to a factory like yourselves that it's going to end up on the market in India or China or somewhere else because we just took a chance? How would you react to that?
Well, I would say let's not call it a job for me, or let's not call me a factory. First of all, if you are passionate about your product and you want to protect it, your factory should be your partner, not as a profit sharer, but as a partner in that product. And the factory owner should be someone who is as passionate or more passionate than you for that product and believes in you, because he's going to spend his time and money as well. Regarding if it can be given to someone else or not, you have to be shrewd, you have to be cutthroat, and you have to have your legal battles over it. No factory would want to give your product to someone else unless you are filling his stomach. If the factory is greedy, I think that partnership should not have started in the first place. So you should consider the factory as a partner if you want to develop something, because there are a lot of factories who are only interested in cloning the product, and such factories will not be able to develop a new product.
Kush, I'm going to turn another question to you. I'm sorry, Sergio. You want to add to that?
Yeah, can I just make a
Yeah,
quick
sure.
comment? So I think one important thing to keep in mind when you find the factory, depending on how much you're investing and at what scale, you need to, at the end of the day, if you find the factory that gets your item out, you need to develop a relationship and some trust with that factory, right? If you can't, then you need to find another factory. So that's part of the process, is when you get the item developed, do you trust the factory? And ultimately, at some point in your business life cycle, you need to go out and spend time with the factory. There's, like, yes, you can get away with it, but there's, in my opinion, there's no replacement for face-to-face and creating that trust. So,
Are we only talking about invention products, or a couple of disposable items, things that don't have patents on, foil pans?
Okay, that's a good question. We're going to take the questions later, but I think because we're on that subject, we're going to take that one.
Are we talking about only on invention items?
Well, we're talking about developing your own product to sell as an e-commerce product. But if we're talking about other types of products that aren't necessarily e-commerce products, there is a different approach to this as well. And one of the things I wanted to turn to Kush on this, thank you, Sergio, was the question is, as you said, the factory should be a partner with you. And of course, and as Sergio said, you certainly want to meet them face to face at some point. But what about pricing? I come into you and I have an idea of what I want to spend. You have an idea of what I want to spend. But let's be honest, it's not what I necessarily believe is going to be true, and nor you. So if I tell you it's worth $10 and you tell me, no, it's worth 20, where do we find? Now, I already exposed my product to you, and now I'm uncomfortable because now I gave you my product. Now, I have to walk away from you. You have no allegiance to me. What happens?
In my experience, there is a base price to any product that you can make. And if you say that a product should be at $10, and in reality it cannot be lower than $20, then maybe your expectations are wrong. Means you cannot reduce the price of a New York pizza slice to 20 cents. You can demand it at 20 cents, but you cannot get it at 20 cents. You
So
have
let
to
me
pay
ask
it
you
all.
another question. Since we all will deal in foreign currency at one point or another, and Yossi, I'm also going to ask you this question. If you're producing something at a factory, is it better to pay them in U.S. dollars or to pay them in the local currency? Yossi, you want to answer that first? Then I'll let Kush.
It's harder to pay them in local currency, but they prefer it.
What would you say as a manufacturer here in the States that you want to produce that item, is it better for you to bring to Kush his currency or yours?
Factories will often give a small discount if you pay in their local currency.
And how do you feel about that,
Not
Kush?
really. I've never had any transaction in the last 10 years in my local currency.
Thank you. So, we do have this problem today. And as a matter of fact, if you work with foreign sellers, and I'd like Yossi to jump in on this with me, a lot of times there's a lot of banks, and you'll deal with different people with different banks. And Kush, of course, if you have comments on this, if you're dealing in China, that's one thing. And they have banks that are business banks, and they have local banks. When you're dealing with people who have local banks and they tell you to send the money to the local bank, you have really no protection. So keep in mind when you're sending money to a bank, a wire in a local area, that's not covered under the auspices as HSBC or some other bank. Always ask them for their business bank, and that's the only way you'll make any payments when you're transferring money overseas. Does that happen to you, Yossi? You feel like the same scenario?
We only pay to business accounts, and we do test wires first. Ask them. We send them a random amount of money. We ask them how much money they received, and if they can confirm that, we wire them the remainder of the money.
Now, I'm going to direct this question actually to you, Mark. It's a different question. It's a little off the subject here. When you're building your Amazon account and you're in the financial area, of course, you have a lot of money growing in the bank account. And if, in fact, somebody hacks your account and transfers the money to an overseas place, maybe to a factory overseas or somewhere else you never heard of, what recourse do you have with Amazon as far as legally?
With anything with Amazon, it can be extremely difficult to get a hold of somebody to actually take action. I think in a situation like that would be to get the authorities involved as quickly as possible, and hopefully your bank could urge Amazon to take action. You just sort of approaching Amazon on your own is going to be very difficult to get anywhere.
Okay, understood. Okay, so now I'm directing this next question actually to you, Kush, one more time. So we talked about the partnership, we talked about the price, and we talked about, well, if they walk away, you're still okay. You're not going to really take their product and do much with it. But is temptation ever there? I mean, is temptation ever there? Well, now it's been a year, and you don't really know this person anymore, and you obviously aren't speaking to them anymore. So someone comes along and says, what is that on your desk? And you say, well, this is it. And they say, I want to buy it from you. Now, this person, you do not know their situation in the United States, but it's a good opportunity for you in business. So what would you do in a case like that?
I have a factory and a house to run. What else can I say? If someone is filling my stomach, I would go to him first.
I think the lesson there is you have to protect yourself.
No,
Right?
I
You
would,
have to
I would really
protect
say
your
that
product.
if the other person is sitting in New York, he's coming from New York, and he's able to buy at that price, and he's going to sell it and make a buck out of it, why couldn't you do the same thing? So
Right. Right. So, I think the thing to look out here for is if you're bringing your items overseas at any point, I think taking such good advice from the panelists here, number one, when Mark said, get yourself an attorney before you start this development stage. Make sure there is no legalities with this product. Make sure it's available for you. And as Yossi said, then you start your development stage. And as Sergio said, make sure you plan ahead because you certainly want to be there on the spot market of when it's going to come to market. And as Kush is telling you, of course, this is a partnership together. But if you walk away from them, well, you can't expect them to hold on to that loyalty with you.
Sorry to interrupt here, but I can share a good example.
Please do.
There was a product, I do fitted sheets and sheet sets, if you know about it. So
Fitted sheet sets.
yeah,
Okay,
so
sure.
there was a product called CVC, which was very popular. And someone patented it. When he got the patent, it was a $20 billion market, and we guys cannot produce it. So there is legal recourse to everything. $20 billion market is now with that patent provider, so he's secured now.
Right, so I understand. So you also have a problem, too, as a factory. What happens in a factory when you go ahead and you manufacture something at his factory, and then you decide not to pay him? I'm sure we all face that. I know as far as China factories go, we all face that, where there's problems with the item, and I'm sure someone would say to you, look, there's a problem. I don't want to pay you for these goods. What happens to your item that you just developed? And I'm going to address that to you, Kush, and, of course, to Yossi. And what would you do in a case like that?
It really depends on the problem. It's not a big problem that the product is right, but some clarifications were not there, or you were not organized enough to explain it to the factory. There was nothing in written, and the factory has produced the goods. So it's better to solve it immediately, face to face. That's how things happen with the factories. But if it's a major problem, factories are there to support you. In case you leave the factory standing over there, the factory might take away your deposit, might sell the products in the market, maybe in America, maybe locally, wherever the factory is situated, because the money is not going to come out of the product by keeping it in a warehouse.
Yossi, I'm going to turn that question to you, too.
I agree. Always come to an agreement with the supplier. Never leave them hanging. They can contact the local authorities, and they can block you from leaving the country if you ever go back to the country until that debt is settled. And you don't want to be stuck in China without the ability to leave. So always come to an agreement with the supplier. Whatever the agreement is, spend days, whatever amount of time or whatever you have to do, make an agreement, I have had some agreements which I've made which were very generous to my side, but the factories agreed at the end because at the end of the day, they don't want your goods. You're better at selling your goods than they are. They're going to take a loss. So we had goods which they manufactured incorrectly. We had to ship it back to them from America. They had to redo them, ship it back to us, all at their cost, and they had to accept that because we were holding the cash. But they came to that agreement with us, and we had all the 50,000 headphones that were fine.
So I'm going to turn this question to Sergio for a minute. So there's been many times I've seen over the years where there was a container and a vessel on the water, and the documents are due at customs, and the cash is due at customs. And then they start to negotiate price in the middle of the shipment. So you have a vessel landing in 10 days, and the factory is anxiously waiting for that LC to be paid. And the manufacturer says, listen, I don't like your goods, I'll give you 50 off or send your vessel back. And this is real time, real things I've seen over the years. So first of all, Sergio, if you were the person who the goods were being received for and you made that statement to them, why would you do something like that?
Why would I do something like that? I mean, it's probably not the right time to be having that type of conversation on either side when goods are on the water, but that's not a good situation.
No, it's
And
not.
I would avoid that as a
But
tactic. It's not a long-term relationship builder.
Right. So I would say you're right here. The relationship is going to end. So if anyone is actually considering doing things like this, I think the key point is, I think all the panelists agree, having a relationship with the factory itself, and as Kush, the factory himself, is telling you that's what their key is here. That's what they're really looking for. So you go out there and you want to develop a product, you want to build an investment with them, they want to invest in you too. Be realistic. I think the gentlemen are all saying the same thing. Be realistic. Everything has a price. And, Kush is saying something very important, which I also concur with here, that if you sit down with the factory, even whether you're on the phone or you're face-to-face, and hopefully you're face-to-face, make sure you iron out every detail. This is something that can't be left to chance. You go back later, oh, I meant to do this. Well, you didn't tell me about that. Well, just throw it in because I want it and I need it. That's not the way it really works. And you have to understand, they can't afford to do things like that, and you can't afford to get mad at them because they can't. So these are very important things to help build a relationship. And believe me, the next time around, he's not going to forget that you were good about that, and he's going to help you where he can. And I think you would do such a thing because having that relationship is actually more primary than just having that one-time deal. So I think, yes, Sergio.
Can I make, so one thing you have to remember is, and this has been my experience over the course of my career, when you start sourcing and when you start product development, you never finish. You're never done. If you think you're done, you're probably not doing it right? And it's a general statement because it depends on what business you're in and what category and what products, but you're never done. It's like when you get car insurance. You don't just take the first quote that you get, right? You got to go and figure out, am I getting the best deal? Am I getting the best coverage? So even when you have that great relationship, you still want to look for, have I exhausted all the factories? Am I getting the best price? And so you should always be doing your homework, whether it's improving your item, whether it's improving your manufacturing, whether it's making sure you have the best price. It really never ends. Like, yes, you need to move on to other parts of your business, but you should always be looking for improvements. So in my mind, in businesses that I've seen be successful, and what I recommend to people is product development should never end, even on existing items.
Okay, thank you. I think we're going to start taking some questions from people in the audience. Does anyone have? Yes, sir?
Are you talking a lot about innovative products or products that came up with ideas on their own?
We're talking generally speaking here that there are many different products that are brought to market, and some are more innovative, some have more technology, some are just similar products to other products that are on the market, maybe an improvement. So we're really kind of talking in general terms. Whatever it is that you want to bring to market, as Sergio said, you just never stop developing that product. And we have a whole system how that's actually done from the beginning stages to the end stages. So that's what really we're getting at here. You have something more specific on that, we'd like to answer that for you. Okay, any other questions here on that? Yes, sir.
Are there any basic rules on how to set up payment with factories and percentage?
Great question. Okay, I'm going to turn this to you guys. Is there any set rules of how to set up payments with the factories and how you would structure that? So who would like to answer that? Kush, you'd like to join on that?
So I'll share my experience with it. No factory in India will work without a deposit, number one. Number two, don't expect credit from India, because if you get credit from India, you are paying extra for it without even knowing it. The interest rates in India are 15% per year. You can get cheaper credit over here. So if the factory is giving you credit, they are charging you 1.5 or 3% extra based on the number of months they are giving you credit.
Would the factory tell you up front they're giving you a
No.
percent?
Why would they say? If you are saying the price is okay, they are just earning interest without you knowing. PayPal doesn't work in India. PayPal is not an accepted method of payment. I know it for a fact because everyone wants to buy those disposable masks for the coronavirus, and a lot of people are trying to pay through PayPal, but they have to go through me.
So what about TransferWise? I know that's often used in India.
That is the only method of paying money in India, and you have a risk of 30% of your deposit. So you should always have your good due diligence. You should go to good factory. You should not be greedy if you think that you are going to save $1 or $2 less by going to a new factory which you do not know. Due diligence has to be there in business. It's not about dealing with India or China. You have to be diligent.
Thank you so much. Yossi, I'm going to turn that to you.
In China, it's with products, it's always best to keep your money as secure as possible. Try to negotiate the deposit as low as possible. Personally, I haven't paid a deposit in 4 years. I haven't paid a deposit of hundreds of millions of dollars in 4 years. And I always like to get net terms at 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, because if I could have the product on the shelf in the retail store before I pay the factory and make sure that they're functioning perfectly, every single unit of it, before I pay the factory, I'm golden. But if I start getting defects, I could send back boxes to the factory. Here's the defects. I have a 5% return rate, and I could get a discount on the payment if they agree to that. So I always like to negotiate the deposit lower and pay as late as possible.
So I think we're trying to, and I always know in China, I always see it's like net 10, but net 10 seconds to go get a coffee and then pay me the bill. That's what I always experience. So we don't really, they're not so forthcoming, but I think you're right. Over time, you can build that relationship, and you obviously have getting that. So Mark, I'm going to turn that to you.
I just wanted to add one thing to what Yossi said earlier about verifying the wires and making sure that everything's in order. You should repeat that process every so often. Last week, I had a client call me. He had a factory in China he's been dealing with forever. Their email account system got hacked, and they started sending him fraudulent emails and had him redirect the wires to another account. So continue that process and keep doing it, and don't get soft and start trusting your established processes.
Thank you. So I think the final result is there a real system for payments here? We know that we have to be careful. That's the first thing. We know that. Yossi's saying, look, protect yourself if you can get the credit. Certainly that way you can return the problem items. But, Kosher's telling you, look, don't look for that because we're not helping you. And if we are going to help you, you're going to be paying for it anyway. So the real system is keep yourself protected and make sure that you have, as I said again, work with commercial banks. Don't work with parties. No money transfers, no Western Unions. Don't go for anything that doesn't sound legitimate because it's probably not. And I think that's the key thing. And give them a small deposit. If they say, I want 50%, negotiate 20%. Believe me, they're happy to get the money. They know, they understand that that's a realistic scenario. Any other questions there? Did I answer your question for you there? Okay, any other questions can we have? Yes, sir.
Talk about using agents, how to find the right factory, build relationships with these agents, sourcing companies.
So the question is when to use an agent, when to use a sourcing company, when to use a trading company. Okay, so I think those are all good choices, and let's take a look and see. Yossi, probably I'll start with you there.
Okay. If your long-term plan is to do business with China for the next 20 years, do business on Amazon, retail stores, definitely find an agent in China is definitely going to be a good partner for you, helping you source factories, helping you take care of issues while you're there. But I don't think that's the long-term goal. The long-term goal should be you can be able to do it yourself, have your own agent, your own employee or office in China in the long term. But definitely in the starting stages, If you have a good partner sourcing company or agent, take advantage of that. That could be a very powerful tool.
Sergio, I'm going to turn this to you.
Yeah, look, I think at the end of the day, it's like anything else in business. It's what you're comfortable with, and if that is not an area of expertise, and you can find an agent that's going to help you, then do it. Because if you're not good at it, if you're not good at negotiating, they're probably going to do it well for you. But like you said, longer term, it is something that you want to do direct.
Kush, I'm going to turn this to you because you actually are you're the first line of defense there, being the factory. And I'm sure you get people coming to you all the time that are sourcing companies, trading companies, agents, and so on. Are they taking on both sides, or are they taking only on the one side?
See, where I've learned business from my family, we always keep the sourcing agent on top priority because as a factory, for me, he's going to get me 10, 20 clients. And he's giving me more business to me. And where Yossi said that in the future it would be better to have your own employee or your own office. In my experience, in my field, having your own office is a loss to you. You're unnecessary putting up overheads. Unless you're a big company like Walmart or Target, you really do not need to have those overheads with you. I've seen things happening at such companies. I've had a buyer in New Jersey for 5 years, never met him. We did lot of business through a sourcing company. One day they decided to have their own employee. That employee is taking money from the factory. Apart from the salary they are taking from the company, I'm not working with that employee, and I know that the brand is now going downhill because they did not get the right quality which they were taking from me since 5 years because the sourcing company just said that, okay, the employee just said that I'll give you a lower price, but it came at the price of the degradation of the quality. So that is something I would really say. In India, do not go forward with having your own office.
So I think we have a lot of good opinions on this here. And I think one of the things to note is, and I want to make this comment, all of us who work and understand China well know one thing. The more you push down a price, something's going to give. Remember this, something's going to give. Don't think that just because you went ahead and say, oh, now I just saved $1 on the item, and this guy told me he'll do it $1 cheaper. When you get the item back, it's not going to be what you expected. There could be something. A rubber piece could change to plastic, and so on and so forth. It's not what you expected. And by that point already, it's a little too late for that kind of change. So, and what are you going to do? You're going to fight with the factory and say, well, I want my money back. They're going to say, well, I have your deposit, and don't ship the goods. I'll keep all the goods. I'll dump them locally, right? And you do run into situations like this. So things do change accordingly. So you have to be very, very careful with that. Do we have any other questions? Any other questions on that? Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes. Wait. I'm sorry. Did I answer? You got your answers to your questions? Is there another part of the question?
Agents, can you work with an agent who they basically give you the factory, but you have an agreement with them?
Okay, so the agent and the factory have an agreement. I'll just actually answer this. The agent and the factory do have an agreement, but it's not always that the agent is taking from the factory, and I think I also appreciate what he's saying. You're more apt to find that an employee will have, he'll probably be the one who you really should watch out, because when he's there, and look, they're going to entice him with a lot of opportunities to do business with the factories, and those opportunities come with money, and obviously money can bring a certain sensibility that we don't really know what can affect someone's mind. So having an agent who this is his job is to come out there and do the best thing for you. His job is to perform well because you are his life, and that's what he has. If he doesn't earn your business, he doesn't get paid. So it's a lot better than just having a standard employee. I'm sorry, I want to take some more questions before we close. Yes, sir?
Obviously, Yossi said before that you work out terms from that 30, that 60, or whatever, that's because you're giving them a lot of business. But when someone starts small, obviously they won't figure out for paying out.
Right. So the question is, how are you getting net terms if you're starting off small? So Yossi, please address that.
You have to show them that you're a bigger company than you are. You have to make them comfortable in your ability to pay, to show how much history you have. You have to show them partner factories that you've worked with, that you've paid on time. Let them call them. I've paid this guy on time for 3 years straight. Call him and make a relation. Build a trust with them. I don't think your overall how much money you're doing is going to affect the terms. I think the trust and your history is probably better at that. The first time you work with them, I think your best, you probably have to work on terms that are more favorable towards the factory. And
As a businessman, would you sell goods to someone who walks in without taking money from him? That's the same thing over here. You need to have a good inspection agency. I would always say, no matter how long you are having a relationship with the factory, pay for inspection, change your inspection agent every time, have the goods inspected, because the factory owner might have a clean heart and a clean conscience, but the worker, we might have shouted at the worker for something, and the worker might want to spoil the things for the factory owner, and he might end up doing something wrong. So you need to have your goods inspected anytime.
even after it's packed, this inspector comes and opens packages and checks them. Yeah.
Okay, we have 5 minutes left of the session before we end. I just want to acknowledge our sponsor of this session, Savvy Returns. We have Yossi, is it Gertner? So Yossi is here. I don't know that much about his space, but if you have overstock, then why let it collect dust? They'll purchase your product. So please see Yossi if you're interested. You can also see Yossi at his booth in the main hall after the next session. And once again, thank you to the panelists, and we'll take some final questions. After this is done, you can move to the next room where the next keynote will take place.
Okay, so we're going to take one or two last questions, and send you guys on your way. Yes, sir?
Do you recommend private labeling of products versus like manufacturing your own products?
So you know what, that's a great question. Private labeling or manufacturing? I'm going to turn that question first to Sergio, because retail-wise, it's certainly going to be important.
It depends. So I know that's probably not the answer you want to hear, but I think it depends on the situation. It depends on where you're trying to do business. If it's a very competitive field, you might be better off doing a private label exercise. If it's not competitive and you feel strongly about what you can bring to market, then you're probably better off doing your own thing. That's the best general feedback I can give you. It's really a case-by-case basis, depending on the category, depending on what your objectives are, as with most things.
Thank you. Okay, well, let me get one more question here while we have a minute. Any other questions? Okay, well, any panelists, thank you so much. Anything you want to add to that? Thank you so much. You guys got the best experts here. They know everything. Thank you. Thank you so much.